Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're going to talk about a question that somebody sent to us, as Saul would say, on the inner tubes. But first, he needs to tell you about a charity.
Somebody emailed me and asked if we could mention this charity on the air, and I decided, sure, no problem. And it's actually gaming related. It's helping game creators keep creating. It's a charity for people who are authors of RPGs or are connected to the industry who have fallen on hard times, and made by gamers. It's the people who are in charge of it are gamers who just want to help people who go through a rough patch.
So give them the website.
The website is www.rcrfcharity.org.
Okay. You can put it in the bottom of the notes at the end of the episode.
All their money that they collect goes to giving out the money, other than the expense of the website. Everything else is donated. Everybody who the treasurer, everybody who is part of the charity donates their time. So it's completely open face. They tell you how much money they brought in and how much money they've given out every year. So if you want any more information, just click on the link that we're going to have below in the show notes. We really believe that gamers love helping gamers, and it's been a pretty rough year for a lot of people. But let's, if we can, give some money, then let's do that.
Only if you can, because we know some of you can't.
Yeah, right.
So somebody wrote in and asked a question, and what was the question?
And the question was, how do you plan the middle of a long campaign?
So, a campaign like, what kind of campaign?
Well, a large campaign, like a long campaign, something that instead of a one shot, there's a long campaign is something that'll take place over multiple sessions. Now, I would say a long campaign is at least 10 sessions long, depending on how long you play, but they could be years long, right?
Well, depending on your group. Most home groups, which are now Roll20 groups currently, most home groups have been playing for a long time, and usually they don't just play once and do a one shot and then the next week do another one shot. They're usually in a campaign, or it's just what do you call it? Your favorite term? A sandbox?
Yes. Right. We play in all my groups, which I only have 2 or 3, maybe 4. We play mainly one shots or short number of sessions, and then we switch GMs and switch games. The group that I play with, my friend calls the Stanford group, normally we play different games, but lately we've been not stuck. But
you guys are playing a campaign. Don't lie.
We all decided we really like the One Ring. We like the way Bay runs the game. I'm a co-GM, so I give him a break every once in a while. But we really like that game. We really like exploring that whole world. And so, you're right.
It turned into a campaign.
It's turned into a campaign with a little bit of splattering of one-shots here and there of different games.
Yes.
So what happens is when you plan a long campaign, a lot of people, I think a lot of authors have this, is they know the beginning of the book and they know the end. And the part in between is what they have to figure out, or that's the big part of the book, and this is the big part of the campaign.
That's most of the book is the in-between.
Yeah, the in-betweens.
So after you set up your campaign, say you set it up so your players are going after a big bad guy that they're going to meet at the end and destroy or something like that.
Destroy. Wow. They could help somebody.
Or thwart.
Okay, I see.
They will save the world.
All right, yes.
It's the journey in between that you're talking about.
Yes.
And how to write it, or how to plan it out.
I think it depends on your campaign, right? The first thing I put down was it depends on the
type of campaign.
The campaign setting, right? A lot of it depends on the world that you're living in. And then the second thing I put down was the type of game that it is. It's a mystery game, it's an expedition game, it's a exploration game, is it a high adventure, all these things. Though a campaign can include all kinds of things, but the main impetus of what the whole game is about is usually centered on high adventure or mystery or investigation or figuring things out. Now, of course, that depends on the kind of game you're playing. And then for me, I put it, a third thing was how much player agency you have in this game that you set up. So all those three things to me kind of make up this how to deal with the middle part of your game.
Which makes sense especially if you're running a module adventure like Storm King's Thunder that you ran.
Right.
It took us a year and a half or something to go through it.
And you guys ignored it. I ignored, or you guys ignored 3/4 of that book.
Well, yeah, because we were having fun. We made our own adventure inside the adventure.
Oh no,
right?
not yeah, exactly. I was just saying that there's so much in that book that was not used, and I could probably run it again and just give you a different goal, and you can come across all these encounters and plot points that I never used or touched on, and you guys wouldn't know that you guys were still running in Storm King's Thunder.
So when you are playing a adventure like that, the writers give you all of those different things. They don't think you're going to hit every one of them, do they?
I'm not sure. I think Storm King's Thunder, it is probably I believe it's probably one of the better written modules or campaigns I've read. But there's certain other ones. For example, a real famous one written by Larry DiTilio, Mass of Narcoleptop. No,
sorry that he butchers that.
I'm not sure how to say it, so I just rushed through it. But
that thing he wrote that a long time ago, and I still see it on.
Well, they just reprinted it about 2 or
yes.
3 years ago and did quite a bit of what do you call it? They did accessories to it, like
yes.
there's an accessory box which has all kinds of cool things.
They glammed it up.
Yeah, oh yeah. And they revamped it and made it for 7th edition, I think.
And for all of the Call of Cthulhu groups that I see on Facebook and on the internet, people love that campaign.
Right. It's considered one of the best campaigns ever written. Either better or on par, depending on who you ask, right? And depends on what their favorite game is. The Great Pendragon campaign for Pendragon is equally viewed as one of the best written and published campaign settings. And those things are huge, right? There's a lot of stuff in them. And Larry, when he wrote it open-ended, right? There's a start. I think you start in New York or something. Mm-hmm. And then you go, there's clues that point to different cities around the globe. And you don't know what city these people are going to go to because they can go to either one. I've never played in it. I've never ran it. So I don't own it, which is kind of sad. I should go buy it somewhere. Anyway, so that is a kind of a interesting way of doing a campaign where you have the beginning, you have the end, and in between these clues point to different cities around the globe. I think Berlin is one. Cairo is another place. I think sure England probably.
England's a whole country. You mean London?
Yeah, probably London and Paris, of course. So the clues point to various cities, and it's up to the characters to decide which clue they're going to follow. And when they go to that city, it gives you more clues to other cities and stuff like that. From what I've read, of course, like I said, I never played. The Pendragon is a little bit more.
Pendragon is based on years, and I mean
right.
So it's a little bit different, but it is very well received. I hear people love it.
Right.
And the small couple of Pendragon games I've played in, I've really found very interesting because it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's like even if you're just going to a tournament or you're being stuck, you get stuck inside of a realm that you can't get out of or you die, and on the GM, it's a lot of fun.
And that Great Pendragon campaign, usually it takes over such a long period of time that, well, there's not usually, it takes over such a long period of time
that your grandson or your great-grandson is playing.
It's going to finish the game.
Campaign, yeah.
And then, but see, that seems a little bit more, I don't want to say formulaic, but that's
more realistic in a way that your character's not going to make it that many years since you're a knight, right?
Well, there's that, but I'm saying is that there's this is what happens in this year. That's going to happen whether you do anything about it or right.
not.
Right. I guess you could have an impact on a battle and stuff like that. So maybe a battle might be won instead of lost. I don't know. I've never ran or played in that campaign either. But it seems to me that more things are set out in a very, sequential pattern. Like this is the year of this battle. And in 5 years from then, this is going to happen. And so unless the characters possibly could have some impact in the setting and the way things turn out.
And that would depend on the GM, right? And
right.
How much they want to mess with the messed with history that's in there, the history that's been altered a bit.
Right. And currently we're playing the One Ring, and we, Bay and me, both of us, we're co-GMs. We're using the Darkening of the Mirkwood, which is also has this timeline, right? When obviously because we're dealing with something that was written by Tolkien, and this happens in this year, and this happens in this year, and but have a discussion on Bay as to how much impact can the players have in a greater
story
in the world of Middle Earth.
Well, when you're playing with an IP, as you would say,
yes.
that, you probably want your players to, I mean, it depends on your game, because it can be an alternate history, right? But you would want whatever they do can impact, I would say, where they are and them,
right,
but not necessarily the other events taking place.
Right. But since, for example, I think I mentioned this before, at one point I kind of introduced Gollum.
Yes.
Right? And Gollum, I think they captured him, or maybe they captured him from another group of goblins who had captured him. Anyway, so they had Gollum, right? And I guess they weren't. The game is situated or built around the idea that it's very, there's a lot of chivalry in this game, right? And anything you do that's really like bad, you get these shadow points, right? Which is bad, right? You don't want to get too much shadow points, or you get too much shadow points and then you lose your character to madness, right? To it's been taken over. It's another way of getting rid of the character, but if you kill an unarmed enemy, you get a point of shadow, even if it's an orc, right? So you either you let them loose or you just fight it out to the death, and Kirk versus the Gorn style, right? You're not going to kill a person who's tied up and a prisoner with no weapon.
You're not. Someone might, and then they'll get a shadow point.
So at one point they had Gollum, and then they were attacked, and the little bastard snuck away and got away. I even toyed with that. I had thought about it, but what happens if they just like, they kind of, I don't know if they knew who he was, because I really didn't describe him very well. They just thought he was an ugly orc or an ugly goblin. But of course they figured out who he was. But I ran the risk of them killing him, because at one point they had control over Gollum, and they didn't kill him, right? So what would happen if they killed him? I mean, what would happen in the campaign? Since he takes a big part, well, he destroys the One Ring, right? So because he goes nuts and flies off the edge, at least in the movie, and the books too. So that's a huge risk that I took, that they wouldn't kill him. But two, I also thought if they change that, I'll just roll with it. I'll see what they can do.
Then the story would just change, and maybe Samwise would have had to be the one to
toss the ring, or cut the finger of Frodo. Yeah, right, exactly. So anytime you're dealing with that situation,
but that would have just been an alternate history to the Tolkien history, right?
Right, and I think that's, for me, I think that's the best way to deal with an IP that's so loved and ingrained, and you got to be upfront with the players when you play. You say, this is our Middle Earth. I think somebody, who is it? I think it's the person who makes Eberron. Damn, I can't believe I forgot his name. But he made this campaign setting called Eberron, and he's always said, my Eberron, when he talks about Eberron. Because he says,
because it's each GM's world, right? Right,
and to do what they want, and if something happens in one person's campaign, I guess they ask for a lot of advice, right, from him, in emails or on Facebook or whatever. And this happens a lot, even in, I know we're going slightly off the subject, but even people like asking questions about rules as written, and I go, what is the rule if this happens, right? And I'm a part of a Facebook group called D&D 5th Edition Rules as Written, and I really got to get out of it, because these people drive me nuts, because they ask these questions, and that's fine that they ask these questions, but what I see is like, who cares? Why do we really need to?
A lot of people, that's one of the things about Rules as Written, is that some people really want to play it the way they believe the rules are written, but that kind of takes away from the spirit of role playing, right? That it's your game, and if you don't like the way the rules are written, then change them just a little bit, right?
Right.
So that it works for you. Tell your players you're changing them,
yes.
But make sure that I don't like that rule. I don't like the way that it doesn't give you the agency to do what you want to do.
Right.
So I'm going to adjust it this way. And that is why the GM is there, right? To make the story better.
And depending on how they want to run their game, it depends. A lot depends on how well they want to stick to the IP, the rules, and all these other things. We're all over the place in this one, but let's go back to the setting, right? The setting is important because it dictates it kind of dictates the kind of game you're going to run. Like if I'm going to run in the Conan world, then that dictates there's not a lot of magic. If I'm going to run a game,
and if you do use magic in the Conan world, you may kill your players that you have with you.
I don't think
you came close. You opened up a big hole in the ground.
Well, you guys messed up your agility rolls and you guys fell into the hole. My fault. Not my fault.
So
I warned you.
So there's that.
The campaign setting has its own rules, right? Built in.
Right.
When just the world that you put it in.
But then just the campaign itself. So you have the beginning of the campaign.
Right.
And how do you get to the end of the campaign? What's the exciting part in the middle?
Okay, so the exciting part in the middle, it depends, right? Like if there's a lot of player agency, there's a lot less to plan, I think. If there's not a lot of player agency, like let's say original D&D, where most people were playing dungeons, the dungeon is the plot.
Even modern D&D, the Mad Mage's dungeon with 100 levels, probably more if you accidentally step into a vortex somewhere. But yeah, dungeons make it harder but also dungeons make it easier on the GM and the fact that all of the rooms are populated with things, right?
Right. Things are already set, and it's the only decision that the players make is which way to turn. And
that's their player agency, right? They get to go decide if they're going to open the door or not.
Not a lot of player agency.
Who knows what they're gonna encounter?
Yes, and so like I said, original D&D, if you played it the way that it was basically made to be played, you played in a dungeon, you busted down doors, you killed monsters, and so there's not a lot of player agency in that. But let's say you play, what is it?
Any mystery game.
Okay. Why?
So, any mystery game, there's going to be, from the beginning to the end, you have the beginning, who the killer is, right?
Okay.
If it's a killer.
The incident.
Yes. And then you have the ending
Solving
when you solve it.
Yeah.
So in a mystery game, whether it's your adventure or somebody else, a written adventure, there's going to be points in it that, like clues.
Right.
And it's not necessarily how they get to them. They can go, your players can go any way they want to.
Yes.
So you're just going to want to make sure that they hit those points, right?
You would hope so. I mean, I think a good mystery game, you point to the next clue.
The problem with that, having played it recently in some mystery games, is that you can't always tell what the next clue is, or where the GM is actually pointing you to.
I think you're right in that sense, because you don't know if the clue is good enough or if the players are good enough to get the clue, right?
I wouldn't use that term, if the players are good enough. I would use the term, if the GM is good enough to let the players know where the clue is.
How about this? If the clue is obvious enough to point in the right direction.
Yes.
Right. So a good game mystery game for me has been Gumshoe, right? Because I love the idea of the basics of the game, which means that if you're in a mystery game, solving mysteries or you always get the clue.
Yes.
That leads you to the next clue, or that propels the game forward.
That's what I was going to say, and I haven't played Gumshoe, I don't think, but I was going to say wherever the next clue is, say your players go the wrong way, well, just get a big arrow and point them in the right direction, or just move your clue to move that person to where they are, right?
So there's a few people that I know that don't really like the whole Gumshoe system because they don't like the way combat works and then this and that. And some people don't like the fact that you only roll one 6-sided die, which has to do with probability charts and all this stuff. But I like the concept that if you are a group of investigators, whatever that is, for whatever reason you're together, and you come across a scene. If somebody, let's say somebody has biology, you're automatically going to get the biological clue.
Right.
Now, what Gumshoe does is that it says if they automatically get a clue, but if they want a better clue or a chance to get more information, you get to roll, right? And so I like that idea, because what happens is in a mystery game, you need a clue to move forward. It's like that door, right, in the old D&D, right?
You got to open that door, but you can't make that roll.
And you're rolling to bust down doors and
You've been rolling for 45 minutes and the door still isn't.
Well, it's like everybody takes a shot at the door, right? Starting with the strongest fighter. Damn, I didn't bust down the door. Okay, let the cleric do it. So the cleric does, nope. And then like the wizard has a strength of 8. There's no way he's gonna make it. But let's say he doesn't make it. So you're stuck. You're stuck behind this door, and you're like, okay, what do we do? And I think in the original rules, you couldn't repeat busting down a door unless it was like a day later and stuff like that. I don't remember, but I remember getting stuck behind doors every once in a while. And that's and who wants to role play, if you call it that, this idea of, oh, I need a 19 or better on a roll before we can proceed, and you're just rolling the die. I'll wait 10 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna wait another 10 minutes. That's boring as heck.
That's why you want your players to come up with other ideas, and then as a GM, you're gonna change the number they need to reach, or you're gonna do something to.
So Gumshoe ignores all that crap and says you just get this clue. But what happens is if you roll and you succeed, then you get a better clue, which gives you more information. And I think in Gumshoe they say you should have like 3 levels of clues to wherever the clue is. And so when I read a module for that game, every clue has 3 levels of information or detail, and I think that's really neat. I think that's a really neat way to deal with that situation.
I think that you can take that and apply it to any campaign, right?
Right, and that's what, and exactly, and that's a really good idea. I mean, I think Robin D. Laws wrote that. What the same guy who wrote Feng Shui wrote a couple of those books that use Gumshoe. Ashen Stars is one, which is a science fiction one, which I've been really wanted to run, but just haven't had time or haven't gotten around to it. And some ideas that he has, I think, are just brilliant. Like I said, it just that was an eye-opening introduction to his game when I'm like, wow, that's pretty neat. Because I've tried running mystery games, and you're right. If they don't get that clue, you're like, man, they didn't roll well. And then the idea is, why make them roll? It was enlightening to me.
Right. Like if you need the players to see a column of dwarves coming towards them and they don't make their roll, you might want to let one of them see it anyway, right? And if you don't, then they miss that.
Right. And like I said, you don't need to have that door that can open if that door leads to the rest of your campaign. So that was sort of the setting, right? And like I said, and that's the setting dictates how the middle of the game is going to run, because like in Storm King's Thunder, you guys were just like thrown into that world, right? And basically there was fires,
literally,
there was fires that your group would put out. Oh, there's trouble in this town. I'm going to go there and help this out. Oh, there's trouble over here. I'm going to happen to go over there and deal with that situation. But there was no linear way of action. There's no linear way. You're not going to go from point A to point B to point C. Where in a mystery game, it's totally different. They kind of have to go to different points, usually, to get the clue that leads to the next clue. And then that place, you get a clue that leads to the next clue, which is another location, until you get enough clues to rip off the mask of Mr. Jenkins, and you reveal that there is no ghost, and it's just old man Jenkins trying to buy the real estate of the carnival so he could put up multiple level housing.
Yes, but even in a mystery game, you shouldn't be stuck too much with, you have to make it to this house to find the clue, because if you do, I mean, if you say your players go to the house next door, I mean, what are you going to do then? So that's part of the game, right? Trying to give them the information without taking away. You have to go and knock on house number
Well,
1470.
I would hope the clue. Let's say the clue mentions a red house. Well, you're not going to have a fuchsia house.
Well, maybe there's two red houses right next to each other.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that, right? You would put a red house and everybody else's house.
Maybe
is white.
it's a row of red houses. I mean, come on.
Well,
it depends on the GM and how
the GM deserves the
torture
yes.
of the players not doing what they
no,
should.
it's the
or
fourth red house on the corner. Okay, so you're right. I think when you got to make it, you got to make the clues real clues, right? If the clues just confuse the characters more, players, then that's not a real good clue.
But if you're not running a mystery game, then it's okay to, wherever they go and whatever they do in the middle of the campaign, you should just have like plot points, right? You say, what are we today? You don't even have to say, what are you doing? And then they say, they're going to go to the left. Okay. And you just give them an encounter, right?
Oh, okay. I would think that's kind of more like a open-ended game, or a what do we call sandbox game. I think a plot point game, or I like they use encounters, or I like to call events, because encounters to me kind of
symbolize fighting.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Unagi. I mean, so exactly. I think the idea that when you say encounters, it's automatically considered a combat situation. That's why I like to say events, because sometimes they're like, well, that it takes away from the idea that it's combat orientated. When you have certain situations like this is going to happen, an event happens, and you go there and you deal with that event, and either it points to another event or a clue. It doesn't have to be a mystery game, but it should point you to a direction that where your party should go next, or where the adventure should go next. Now, whether the characters or the players decide to do that, that's totally up to them. And as a GM, you have to figure out how to corral or herd these cats in the direction you want to go to.
Good luck with that.
Or you could just say, well, things are going to happen, whether the players go with their characters to this next location, right? Like if they don't go to that location, a lot of people say, well, let whatever would have happened without the players' intervention happen. Like if they could have saved the barmaiden from this evil shadow, well, she dies because they didn't act, and that information gets back to them somehow, and stuff like that. Like kind of like what was happening in that mystery game that we played in. We weren't getting the clues fast enough, and we were arriving just in the time after the
death,
which I think is kind of was the way it was written. I don't think we were. Was it?
I think it was the way it was written.
I don't think we were being slow or not moving fast enough in that game, but we don't know. We didn't read I haven't read the.
Too many people died.
Yeah, I haven't read the
module.
The module, so that would have been interesting. I never talked to Felipe about whether it was written that way or if we were just goofing off too much and we're too late.
We weren't goofing off at all, but we could have been too late because it takes us a long time to move.
But it seems to me that that's probably how it was written.
Yeah.
Because toward the end of the game, we actually got there before the people got killed.
Yes.
And we were actually able to do stuff we thought would prevent them from getting killed, but it didn't happen. But because the ghost can actually follow people. A lot, like I said, a lot depends on the game. In the mystery game, you kind of you gotta hit the clue areas and figure out what the clues are to move on to the next encounter or event, and then hopefully you'll be able to solve the mystery, capture the serial killer or whatever it is that you're doing. I think if it's more open ended, like you said, sandbox, which can be any kind of game. Except I think mysteries can't be really sandboxy in a certain
mysteries
sense,
are hard
because there's things that are going to happen. The bad guy's going to do things, and if the characters are going the wrong direction, then the bad guy can keep doing whatever he's doing. So in that sense, they may never catch up to the bad guy. But this works in high adventure. This works in space opera type games where the characters are just freebooters or adventurers or mercenaries doing whatever they want in a world that's totally open to them. So when you start that game, you definitely have a beginning, right? How the characters start, how the characters get together, what happens that drive these characters to move forward, and then you have the end of where they meet the big bad guy, they save the world, they save the universe, or they will do whatever.
And usually at the beginning, they get a job or something, right, or an assignment, dependent, like if it's a
military camp. Yeah, I agree.
And then from there, however they get to the end of it is the fun part, right?
Right, and they totally move to propel the game forward. They're the ones that are doing things. They're the ones that basically it's almost telling the GM where they're going, right? Because they're going, oh, we're gonna go. What's over here, or where can we get this? They're the ones asking the questions, and based on whatever information the GM gives them, they decide where to go.
Right.
And I think this is a harder game to run as a GM because you really have to be on your toes, because you cannot plan for every decision they're gonna make, and every plan that the players make and go to. So I think we had this problem in the Traveler game. There was definitely an adventure that was in the game, but we didn't know.
It took us a while to get to the planet because
we didn't know where to go.
We looked at the planets and picked the wrong one a couple of times, but we finally did make it.
So I wasn't sure what we were doing. I mean, I wasn't sure what we were doing. I wasn't sure if we missed it, we're going the right direction, right, or something, because he did leave it pretty open-ended. I think we had a sort of a goal, but
we did, but it took us a while to find the right place.
Okay. I think as long as the GM doesn't mind coming up with things on the fly, that's a perfect way to run a game.
If there's no time constraint, and
right,
if it's a campaign, there shouldn't be a time constraint.
Right.
So you should be able to investigate a couple planets that have nothing to do with where you're supposed to be.
Your main point of the adventure. And that wasn't a campaign though. That was just a short 3-session game. But a longer campaign, there's a lot more things to plan out. I think my favorite way of doing things is probably Storm King's Thunder, where there's certain things that the character should encounter. Let's say it's a long campaign, and you want the characters to hit 4 or 5 points, like 4 or 5 adventure sites, and they're gonna get clues that points to the first one, because that's kind of where you want them to go, because that's where all your maps are. You have all your monsters lined up. That's Storm King's Thunder's a D&D game, but it'll work for anything. But they could go anywhere they want, dodge around your plot point or multiple times, circle around it. But it's a good idea to have clues, or even just say, oh yeah, the information you need is in Altered Village or whatever. So then they go there, right? And that's where this event happens, whatever that event does, and it kind of points to the next place. But you're not going to say, well, you have to go to the next place. You just let the characters. So you let them meander where they want, but you want them to hit those points that along the way point to this greater evil, or point ending the campaign in this fantastical, exciting fashion.
Right.
Storm King's Thunder for me was really well done. The Darkening of the Mirkwood is kind of like that in the sense, because it just says this is what happens depending on the year, and you could do that, or if the characters don't act or react, this village will basically cease to exist. It's up to it's up to the characters, the players, if they take enough interest in this location, and if they do take enough interest, how are they going to solve the situation? And that's pretty cool too. And what I like about it is it doesn't give you a lot of information as to what should happen. It just says this is what's happening, and the players have to figure out what to do. It doesn't tell you how to figure it out what to do. It doesn't tell you if something's going to work or not. So I'm like, wow.
That's why it's called a role-playing game, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I like it. It's really well done. The Storm King's Thunder took about a year and a half probably. And like I said, you guys probably hit 40% of the book, honestly, of all the stuff that's in there. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. I never played Pendragon campaign, but my friend Shannon, who ran it, I I think he's ran it for like 3 years online. I think they play, I think every week, 4 hours 4 hours a session. So that's a lot of sessions, and I think he's even posted some on YouTube and stuff. I don't know anybody who's actually played the Master of Narcolepsy, but I've heard great things about it, and it's a lot like a plot point campaign where there's an end, there's a beginning, and the players decide how to solve or how to go whatever way. I think that's the best way.
And they try not to go crazy as they're doing
there's
it.
There's that. I think that's the best way to run a game, a long campaign, because what happens is if you try to railroad them, if those rails go from point A to point B and keep them on that one, I don't think that the players will see those rails, and they may not like it. They may think that, well, kind of like, why am I here? You just do your story, and I'll go and play a video game somewhere. So there's that risk, but I think most games aren't that way anymore, and I think if it's sandbox, then you have to have that ability to think on the fly and be very spontaneous and have a good ability to be have good improvisational skills. So
I don't know if that answered the question of how to run the middle of your campaign.
Well, okay, so to me is, if you are running a long campaign, it's good to have a good beginning and a good end. And then if depending on how much player agency players have, if they have a little bit of player agency or quite a bit, you could have plot points, as you call it, events that happen in the game. And if they don't hit that event or don't get there into your timeline, then something should happen. It shouldn't be like people don't.
Well, I don't think the only problem I have with that is I like the idea of things are like a timeline with things happening.
Yes,
but I don't know that. So say they don't make it to a village, then the school burns down or something.
Right.
But they didn't necessarily. Maybe you didn't give them the right information, or they just didn't figure out that that's where they needed to go.
Okay, in that sense, yes. But let's say you give them all kinds of clues that point to this location, and they go, well, whatever.
Yeah.
They don't think it's that important.
Right.
To highlight the importance of what's going on, something bad happens, right, in that town where they could have prevented it if they had followed the clues. So that gives you a little bit more urgency for the players to stay on task, even though it's
right.
You're not running a railroad, but the world is moving no matter what decision the players make in that world for their characters. So I think that's important. I think to have this world around them that's alive and going on is probably a good thing. But you're right. But if it's too much like that, if it's too on this timeline, you didn't make it in time, 2 hours ago they burned down, and right, that is a little bit too railroad.
or the GM's just being mean.
Yes. So
is that all your ideas?
I think so. We discussed this for quite a bit. So a lot of it depends on your campaign setting. It depends on the type of game you're running, whether it's a mystery game, high adventure, whatever, your middle of your campaign, and how much player agency. So those three things kind of dictate how you're going to form the middle of your game, which is the chunk of playing. That's the playing of
if it's a campaign, yeah,
of a long campaign. And I think the better way to deal with things is to have events happening in your world, and as the players go from place to place and try to get to the main event, then that's probably for me that's the best way to deal with it. Open sandbox, then you're on your own, because you just have to be quick think on the fly and be able to deal with situations that the characters are gonna get into, and you're not going to be able to plan a lot in those situations.
And we can talk about that at a different time.
That's true.
This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.